Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Northwest Internship Coordinator Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Assistant Director of Career Services here at Northwest. Today's guest on our podcast is Dr. Bob Bergland, the associate or the associate professor, like we only have one.
The genuine article.
I know. An associate professor of mass media in the School of Communication and Mass Media. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We always like to have fireworks, but we haven't quite figured that out on Zoom yet. So how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's a gorgeous day outside after our terrible weather last week. So, yeah.
So everyone, we were talking about students in our office. They're feeling a little bit more, they want to be outside. They're talking a lot. They're kind of getting out of control, but the weather has a big deal, has a big effect on them. So welcome. One of the things that we like to periodically, I like to start in different places on people's career journeys, but I always love to ask people what their very, very first paid job was.
My very first
paid way back, like teenager, very first paid job.
Sure. So my unpaid jobs were working for my father on our family farm. And so it paid off in terms of him saving money, putting that money toward my college education. But my first regular paid job was detasseling corn, actually.
All right.
That was a lot of fun. Let me tell you.
And where'd you grow up, Bob?
I grew up in Mendota, Illinois. It's about an hour and a half west of Chicago. Town of about 7,000 people. So fairly similar to Maryville in a lot of ways.
So on your farm, on your family farm, what type of farm? What did you farm?
Well, so we lived in town during the school year. My dad was a high school teacher, and so weekends and summers we went up to our farm and mainly rented out the land. And so we had a lot of maintenance. We did miles and miles of barbed wire fence in addition to a lot of other work on the farm.
And so then you thought you should move up a level on the career ladder, and then you went to detasseling. So
Right.
how did that come about? You were already in kind of the agriculture area, and so you just hopped right over
there. So one of the ag professors at the high school supervised detasseling corn crews during the summer. And so, for $3.35 an hour, I was out there going through those wet cornfields in the 5 o'clock in the morning. And that was
getting all scratchy.
You bet.
So working hard at that first job, not a cushy office job. Getting out there working with your hands. Yeah.
So did you do that all through high school? Or did you progress in your career pretty quickly there?
Just one summer. We'd worked on the farm most of the other summers, but this summer there was about a month or 6 week gap, whatever the season is, that we weren't going to be, that my dad was willing to part with us for a few weeks. So we did that as our first real paid gig.
So what other jobs did you do in high school?
So my dad was a teacher. He valued education very highly. So he said, your job is to get good grades. And so you will not have other jobs. And so fortunately, I was able to parlay that into receiving a scholarship at Millikin University, a full tuition scholarship. And so I came out ahead, I think, by not working and focusing on my grades and other schoolwork.
So how did you, this is always interesting to me as well. So did you know what you wanted to do when you went to college? So did you know what you wanted to study? And then how did you make that decision of which college you were going to go to?
Well, as far as the school I went to, it was the school that offered me the full tuition scholarship, I guess. So
that made your decision making pretty simple.
That was a big part.
Pretty compelling argument, yeah.
It was a Millikin University, so Millikin with a K-I-N, not K-A-N like our hall here. But it was a very, very good school in Central Illinois, private school, and they had a good writing program. and they were also Division III, and I wanted to continue running track and cross country as I did in high school. And so I could do that at the Division III level. And so it was just a perfect place to be. As far as knowing what I wanted to do, so I'd written for my high school newspaper and wanted to continue that work. And so again, Millikan had a good writing program. And so I continued on, and I realized at the time that I didn't think I wanted to be a journalist. I love journalism, but I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps of being a teacher. He said, you don't want to teach at the high school level, teach at the college level. So I was able to combine my loves of teaching and journalism, and it's been just a great ride.
So you already, this is interesting to me. So you already kind of had that seed of teaching when you went in, like you had a subject area or a disciplinary, but you already kind of had that notion that you were going to teach. So when you were in college, so in undergrad, knowing that if you were going to teach in college, you would have to keep pursuing your education. So how did you approach that as well?
Well, I had taken an education class or two, even though again, teaching college, it's ironically not required to get an education degree. But I taught it was like an internship teaching a composition class in college. And then when I went away for my master's at Purdue University, where I also got my PhD, it was we taught 2 classes. So as part of the assistantship, I was able to teach 2 classes per semester. And so it was really a combining of teaching and taking classes.
And so then what was your master's program?
So my master's program was actually in rhetoric and composition, as was my PhD program with a secondary area in professional communication. So, and throughout my time at Purdue, I also wrote for the college newspaper, the Purdue Exponent, and also taught journalism classes as well as composition classes. So I graduated with basically the experience I needed to be able to get out and thrive. And so I applied then after, shortly before finishing my PhD, applied at Missouri Western and was hired there and taught there for 22 years.
Oh, interesting. Can we go back to that? So I think a lot of people, when you just say writing, they just think of like a blanket writing. They don't think about maybe the nuances of different types of writing, different styles of writing. So what is the difference between, say, if I'm someone who wants to be a journalism major and maybe the composition and rhetoric side of things?
So just it's a different genre, the same as creative writing is a different genre. So just there's obviously a lot of overlapping skills in general, the ability to write well, to understand grammar, to be able to proofread and edit. So there's so many things that overlap, but just some genre specific things. And as far as journalism, I think as much as anything, it's a passion for the truth and a love for talking to people, maybe more so than in other writing gigs. As a technical writer or business writer, you're not going to be maybe talking to people every day as you're more doing maybe.
I think that's a key point though. So if I'm a student, sometimes students come in and they want to do things that they're interested in, but knowing, that journalism piece is kind of about, you kind of have to have a nose for a story. I guess you kind of have to kind of follow your kind of gut about, who to talk to and where you're looking for. I guess I'm thinking of like investigative reporting.
Right.
But I think that's a really good key point. If you're doing technical writing, it's not so much necessarily about those investigative skills. Those are 2 also very different like types of looking at how you get to the writing process. Maybe not so much the writing process itself, but everything that supports that writing process.
Right.
So
and part of it is, obviously it attracts different personalities. And as a teacher, I mean, you can only teach so much, but so students have to have that inside, again, passion and desire for the field. And then for my part as a teacher, I think it's nurturing that, encouraging that, helping develop those instincts.
Yeah, we recently had Rachel Adamson, the the editor-in-chief of the Missourian. And she mentioned that, I asked, have you always been interested in writing and always liked writing? And she was like, I think a lot of student journalists don't think of themselves as writers. And that was surprising to me, because that's why I was always afraid of journalism, because I'm not a super strong writer. Like, I can write a 30-second radio ad, but you want me to write a whole story, that's going to be tough. So I think, the fact that you going in wanted to teach, you went about it from the English rhetoric side. It's different than maybe a student who really likes the idea of interviewing people or chasing that story, and then the writing's just what they have to do at the end of it. So,
yep.
Yeah, those are two very different approaches to writing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, we think about it often. I never thought about it till I worked here, but writing, the skill of being a good writer is very important in our office, because to be able to write a resume, or to be able to compose a cover letter or a personal statement, those actually take some pretty advanced rhetoric and composition skills. But I never actually thought about it till we got into the office. And then of course you see all kinds of cover letters and personal statements, and we hire a lot of students, and we see a lot of documents, but those types of skills are very valuable in our office as well. So maybe could you speak to the skill? So being able to write or compose or to convince someone, like, how can I, if I'm a student, how is that going to help me out in the wide world?
Well, and I've had the good fortune of teaching both business and technical writing. And so I taught resume and cover letter design, and so I actually worked in the Purdue Writing Lab, and so I've looked at hundreds of resumes and cover letters. And I think the skill that is most important for students to have is to really to be able to get out of themselves. So obviously the grammar and punctuation and all that, those rules are critical, because as you know, those errors can immediately disqualify you. I mean, if you're this hugely important document that's going to determine your life, if you have proofreading errors in that document, that says everything about you as a person and potential employee. But I think especially for writing cover letters, I think, and to resume design, is really putting yourself in the position of the reader, of the person that you're going to be applying to for their company. And the more that you can consider their needs, their skills, the type of business they are, and tailor your resume or cover letter to fit that, the more persuasive that document is going to be. So I think, as much as anything, if students should take that into mind. And it's the same way in terms of journalism is really being able to teach. I teach newsworthiness as part of my intro class, and as much as anything, it's helping to understand, what is the reader really going to care about? What stories, what aspects of these various stories are going to be most interesting to them, and to make sure to cover those things well.
It's good to hear it from someone else's mouth.
I was just thinking the same thing. It's so nice to hear a faculty member say the same things we say. So thank you. That's wonderful. Yes.
You can give me my $10 later.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm curious, you went into college knowing that you wanted to teach. When you started doing it at the graduate level, was it what you expected it to be? I think that the image we have from movies and TV shows and literature about what a college professor is not what it is in real life. So was it what you expected it to be, or was it different than you thought it would be?
I think it was largely what I expected it to be. I mean, it was my first couple of years. I feel sorry for my students the first couple of years, because there is such an adjustment to teaching, and there's so many things that you learn, tips and techniques, and for the best sorts of assignments, and all that takes time. And so I had a lot of guidance and those first few years as far as mentoring and a class actually that helped us learn how to teach composition, for example. But yeah, there was a lot of I was not the teacher that I am now, obviously starting out. And to be honest with you, just even coming here to Northwest, I was teaching some new classes, and it takes you a couple of years just teaching a new class to really, again, understand the class, the purpose, the mission, what students need to get out of the class, again, the types of assignments and class activities that work best. And so yeah, there was an adjustment period, I guess, is what I'm saying. I just, like I said, feel sorry for all those students that have been my guinea pigs as I progress as a teacher.
What's your favorite part of teaching?
Great question. I think for me, it is seeing the students grow and develop. And so that's why, I love all my classes, and, in the same way a parent loves all their children, just in different ways, and appreciating and loving those different and unique ways. One of the things I love about my intro class is just seeing these students who have never, most of whom have never published an article before, or written a journalism article before. And by the end of the semester, being able to write a piece. Many of them have gotten their pieces published, for example, in the Missourian or their hometown paper. I have them write a feature story for the last assignment. And so seeing them go from nothing to writing publishable pieces, is really rewarding. And so in the other classes, seeing them take their skills wherever they're at and taking them to the next level, and really being ready at the end of those classes, for example, like my advanced reporting class or my video journalism class, seeing them now to the point where they're going to succeed in not only an internship, but they're ready to go out and do a job, and that they can produce content that is equal to again, stories that might be published by the news press or that are at KQ2 or whatever. And so seeing that progress, I think really, Hannah, is the most rewarding thing for me, to see them grow in their field, their passion, and their skills.
In those, you mentioned the advanced classes. So, Northwest, the journalism department, the Missourian especially, you'll have students who are nationally recognized for their pieces that they do. Is it difficult to critique those students in the advanced classes when, they're the best student journalist in America, and then you're giving them advice? Is that difficult sometimes? I can just imagine that would be, as a student, you'd get a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, and it probably is hard to give advice sometimes to those students.
There's always room for improvement.
Absolutely.
It's the same way Trevor Hudgens and, Ryan Hawkins,
yeah.
The coach doesn't just sit back and bask in their brilliance, although after the game last night, maybe he did more. But I think, there's, especially at the student level, there's always ways they can improve, and take them to the next level. And so especially for those students, it's one thing to get an A, but I try and challenge them, don't be content with that A, even though they're a great journalist. This is, to take on more challenging stories as well, I think is part of that.
So how important, obviously it's important. If I'm a student and I'm taking classes and maybe getting some things published, so what is the best way for me to develop a portfolio? You can have a resume and you can have a cover letter, but honestly, I think as a person who hires, some of the most convincing things have been those portfolio pieces, things that the student has done. How do you encourage students to approach that portfolio building piece?
Well, that's another great question, Hannah. And obviously, one of the great things about journalism is that it's such a PBL field. It's such a profession-based learning. I mean, what they're doing here, being student journalists or writing these sorts of pieces for a class, this translates. That's
literally what you would be doing. I mean, you're doing the same thing you would be doing in a writing environment, right?
Exactly. And so you're right. I mean, I hate to say this, but employers, especially in this field, do not look at GPAs. We're not that much anyway. It's usually not the determining factor. I mean, you're right. It is that portfolio that gets you hired, because, I don't care if you have a 3.94 GPA, if you don't have a portfolio of pieces that show that you can do the sort of reporting that we're doing at our publication or our other media outlet, I'm not going to hire you. The same way with really even a master's degree in some ways, it's can you do this work in the trenches day in and day out, and do the sort of exemplary work that we're looking for. And so really the bulk of those advanced classes are very much portfolio based. In fact, in my advanced reporting class, one of the first things I say on day one is everything you produce in here, every story must be submitted for publication. And while a couple of the pieces can be submitted to, for example, the Missourian or KNWT, there's also assignments that they have to submit outside of the university. And so getting those sorts of portfolio items especially distinguishes them. So for example, in my advanced reporting class, just yesterday, we introduced the magazine assignment, and their task will be to write for a magazine, a professional magazine outside of this university, and to write a pitch letter and submit their article for publication. And so, some of them may not get published, but definitely I've had many students in the past get those pieces published, some at very nice magazines. And those sorts of pieces really help distinguish you, at least in this field, from, again, somebody who just writing for the Missourian and Tower Yearbook and working for KNWT and KZLX, hugely important. But having those other sorts of pieces, especially investigative and magazine pieces that demonstrate advanced skills, that can mean the difference between getting an interview or not getting an interview, or getting hired and not getting hired.
Speaking of getting hired, how did we steal you away from Missouri Western?
I was afraid this question was going to
very important.
I had to ask.
Very important question.
So yeah, basically, I won't go into too much depth, but just to say that my previous chair and dean wanted me to exert a pressure. I advised the student newspaper at Missouri Western, and they wanted me to exert a level of control over the students that I felt, number one, would have violated my professional organization's code of ethics. It would have gone against everything in my teaching philosophy, and also would have violated my students' First Amendment rights. And so there were numerous other things as well, but basically it was an environment in which my immediate supervisors, it was not a comfortable environment. And it happened that, and my students had just published a great article about how Missouri Western had deficit spent $11 million in the previous 5 years. And an article that, again, some of those in power would rather not have seen published, but it was a great investigative piece, and obviously showed that things were not going well at Missouri Western. We were getting a new president. And so all of those factors together, and just that summer, then a position opened up at Northwest here that was a great fit for my interests and skills. And it's the same retirement system and all of that, and obviously within a commutable distance. And so it was like the world is guiding me to follow this path. And so it was, it's a little bit, again, I've been there 22 years. I thought I was going to retire from there. I was comfortable, maybe too comfortable, you get in your ruts. And so this was an opportunity it was kind of neat because I was, while nervous, it was also a chance for a fresh start, here in the last, maybe third of my career, the chance to be teaching some new classes and to be doing some different things. And so that was also very exciting. And so it was painful because, I had accumulated all this, Travis and Hannah, this mass of Griffin attire. So I had everything except, I had Griffin.
I was going to ask, what was the biggest challenge? But I feel like clothing might be a really big challenge.
That was it. I had, Griffin ties, shorts, t-shirts, sweatshirts, windbreakers. And so, yeah, I took it all in a pile and burned it. Just kidding. Gave it to my colleagues, gave all that attire to my colleagues and students. And I went whole hog in. So I still want Missouri Western to succeed. And when they're not playing Northwest, I root for them. But I've gone, yeah, you can see I've gone whole hog in here. So I made one of my first stops was to the bookstore to stock up on my green and white. And it was really weird. There was a Missouri Western Northwest football game shortly after I started my job here. And I was sitting next to a colleague who from Missouri Western. And so it was just really weird to be wearing the green and white next to my colleague and in black and gold. But it was really, the best part, I think, was all these bets that I had with Stephen Chappell, who was the director of publications, all these games that I had lost, lunch bets that I had lost. Now I was able to be on the winning side of one of those bets, and that was kind of nice.
Losing a lunch bet to Steven is no joke. So
it's a serious bet.
That is, yeah.
I've lost serious cash
Right.
paying for those lunches.
I think that the rivalry is, we joke about it, and it's real. There's no doubt about it. But I think really, especially those of us who have been around the university for a while, we kind of realize we all succeed or we all sink. So, don't wish ill will on Missouri Western unless it's basketball or football season, then we might. But
exactly.
Overall university health, we want them all. We all kind of are in the same business. We're all trying to do the same thing. So their struggles a lot of times are our struggles too. So it's nice to.
Yeah, I've no animosity at all
Right.
toward Missouri Western, and again want them to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out, and that's why it's been really heartbreaking to see their financial struggles here this past year. And I mean, they lost a third of their faculty, and it turned out that my position, I would have been one of those almost 70 people who were cut.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very fortuitous again. Mm-hmm. that the position came open, and that I had the wherewithal, I guess, to make that leap here. So, and as you can imagine, I've had no regrets whatsoever. The faculty here have been great. The university is great. The facilities in our program are really outstanding, and so I love it here.
You did bring the First Amendment rights of the students in a newspaper field, though. I mean, and that's a very important piece, I think. Can you talk about you're training up a new generation of journalists? How do you mold them to not to express, to speak on things that need to be spoken on, to search for the truth, but then also knowing on the other hand that the things that you're doing can have serious repercussions for your career and for others? How do you handle that? Or as a teacher, I mean, I feel like that's really your job, right? Is to kind of impart your wisdom to the students. How do you do that?
I think letting them know what is possible in part. I mean, and encouraging their courage in taking on these stories. I still remember my first year at Missouri Western, there was a story in which basically the administration had been violating the law as far as how they were investing their funds and how they were securing a architect for a project. They were bypassing the bidding process for those. And I basically helped guide my students in writing that story. They wrote the story. I just provided, assistance and advice, mainly just advice along the way. And that was a story that, as an untenured faculty member, you're a little bit nervous about seeing when you're calling out your president and vice president who have to respond again to what the local media picked it up as well, as you can imagine. And to their credit, I never got a call saying anything. But I think one of the beauties too of being a state institution like Northwest, I almost said Missouri Western, is that, again, because of the Sunshine Law, the Missouri Open Records Law applies here. And so my students in the advanced reporting class are doing stories that I'm sure maybe the administration here is not especially happy, but showing them the tools, the databases, the sorts of documents that they can obtain, showing them examples of other stories that professionals or students have done, and doing, and like I said, as much as anything, I think just encouraging that spirit and nurturing that quest for the truth, even if that truth might not make everyone happy. I show in one of my first days, I give a quote from George Orwell, who says that journalism is printing things that people don't want to see. Everything else is public relations, and that's that's a kind of a harsh way to think about it, because most of the articles in the news press, the Forum, the Northwest Missourian, are normal, covering events and things like that. But without that journalism that keeps those in power accountable, that is the purpose for the First Amendment, for journalism in a democracy.
Well, right
Yeah.
now I would think is hard for students too, because journalism's not as well esteemed as it's been in the past. And,
Yes.
everybody shouts fake news at everything. And we've even seen with students at the Missourian that they sometimes get pushback from local citizens and groups and all of that. So I imagine that there are students that need that guidance and that reassurance that what you're doing is important and you need to keep doing it, because it is a vital part. And the Missourian is such a huge part of the community. I don't think the students who write for the Missourian understand how vital it is for not just Maryville, but really Northwest Missouri, that it is there and that it's doing the work it's doing. Like, to them, it's a class, or it's a way to build their portfolio, but it's really important to the vitality of the area too, to have a student newspaper that's doing those uncomfortable stories sometimes.
And I think because of all the cuts that have taken place in journalism, and especially at newspapers, as print revenue has been declining, if you think of the Missourian, there's 20 plus students. While they're not full-time students, their staff is several times the size of the Forum. And the same way with a lot of other college newspapers and other communities, they have the resources because of the cheaper free labor to produce the journalism, again, that
high quality journalism.
Yeah,
super
it's high quality.
Yeah, and especially that's the great part about the Missourian here is that again, I don't think maybe the students in the community realize too, not just to take the opposite approach from what you said, as far as the quality of this publication, which again was named best in the state in beating schools like Missouri University of Missouri Columbia, which is of course a great journalism school, and Missouri State and Washington University and all these other universities. So to be able to have that high quality here, and especially under the guidance of Rachel and Andrew Wegley, we've been kind of spoiled. There are Trevor Hudgens and Ryan Hawkins of journalism, I think, here at Northwest, and we've been really lucky to have such high quality journalists here.
If you're giving tips, tricks, words of wisdom for someone who maybe it's spring, so we're going to have a fresh crop of graduates hopping out here in the next couple months, what words of advice do you have for those new grads?
I think by the time they're grads, it's too late. They should have already gotten all the advice that they've gotten. Really, as much as anything, it's the message needs to be sent to those freshmen and sophomores and juniors, is that especially in this competitive marketplace, you need to be doing everything possible to get yourself ready to get that first job. And so that means not just going to classes and getting your B's or C's and doing your required semester on publications. It's going beyond, because there's so many great opportunities here. I mean, our students, you should be taking advantage of the opportunities that are the multiple media here. You should definitely be getting an internship, in a field like journalism. If you haven't gotten an internship at a commercial paper, then you're really selling yourself short. And it's all these other opportunities. For example, we'll be hosting. We were going to be hosting the regional tournament, but for example, if a newspaper can't send a reporter to one of the games, so for example, University of Nebraska Kearney, if they're having a conference game or just a regular basketball game here, they don't have the funds or staff to send a reporter for that commercial newspaper, is write to them and say, hey, do you need a stringer? Do you need someone to write an article like this? So taking advantage of all the opportunities to get publications before you go out the door, and to be doing the sorts of pieces that are going to distinguish you from other people. And so that means doing, again, more investigative pieces and spending that extra time with that feature story to make it especially creative or colorful, to make it really stand out in your portfolio. So really, just to get back to your point, Hannah, is develop that portfolio that is going to really open doors. And in this field too, not just focusing on print, for example, but because reporters now are going to be expected to do multimedia work, is again spending a couple semesters, at KNWT and doing video reporting and audio reporting, and having a well-balanced portfolio makes you that much more valuable on the marketplace.
And you also mentioned something that we hammer away, and we can't do it for them, but reaching out. So I think it's so underappreciated how many if you take the initiative, that little bit of initiative can reap a lot of big rewards for you as a student. So look for opportunities to, like you said, reach out. Hey, can we write this for you? Can we, what do you need XYZ? If they don't have an internship, don't just be like, no internship, reach out to them. Hey, I would love to be an intern. Here are a few of the things that I can do for you. Like, would there be an opportunity for me? Kind of make your own opportunity. Like, there's a huge opening for any student or anybody who's willing to make those openings, I think, or investigate or reach out or ask.
Yeah, employers are really looking for those employees that are going to go above and beyond, that are not going to just clock in from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. And so providing evidence of that, like you said, anything you can do to provide evidence that, hey, I went above and beyond, is going to help illustrate that, hey, they might be this sort of employee for us as well. And so since I have taken numerous students on study abroad, I will make that pitch as well. And so doing things, taking advantage of those sorts of opportunities that, again, Northwest is great at offering, again, helps distinguish you from those other potential employees.
Yeah, I didn't take many journalism classes, but I remember one thing I remember a faculty member told me in one of the classes was that a hungry journalist is always employed and a bored journalist is not a journalist for long. So
that's great.
It's really is true. You got to chase the story sometimes and find the stuff. So don't wait for it to come to you.
I've been waiting for this question because I feel like you might have a different answer than other people since you have different experience. What does it mean to you to be a Bearcat?
That is a good question again, and a tough one. I think one of the things that distinguished, my drive up here today, the nice thing is I get my 45 minutes to drive up here to listen to podcasts, play music, listen to audiobooks, and to think and plan for my classes as well. So this morning I thought about that question and thought about what distinguishes, I think, Missouri Western maybe from Northwest. And I think up here, there's more of a sense of community and family. I think, and part of that is because we have a higher percentage of students living on campus or within a mile, for example, of walking distance of campus, in the same way with the faculty as well. And so I think it is that sense of community and willingness to help each other out that comes with part of being a closer knit community and family. And so that is what I am learning that being a Bearcat is all about, and wearing green and white, of course.
I have a few more questions about as a faculty member. So I think this is something that is also very interesting to me. So you're helping students, you're helping them develop their portfolios, investing in themselves to go out and then to get their journalism or writing, technical writing jobs. So as a faculty member, though, how is the process? Maybe if you're in education, or if you want to be a college professor, maybe you want to teach journalism, maybe you don't want to go out and write. Can you kind of explain maybe your own experiences of looking for a job, especially since you've done it, fairly recently for someone who's been teaching for so long, and maybe the differences in that versus, as an undergrad, just going out and being a journalist, like kind of maybe explain that faculty job search process a little bit.
Sure. Well, the resumes are a heck of a lot longer.
You put everything in there, just put it all in.
I think as far as faculty looking for jobs, it's a matter of, I think, again, really it's the same principles, just applied to a different document. So for example, when I was on the job market 22 years ago or 25 years ago, before coming here, really, well, even in applying here to Northwest, it's really looking at is paying attention to and tailoring your resume and cover letter to fit that job. So for example, I took the time to look at the classes that the program offers that I would might be interested in teaching, the ways that I could help and contribute to the department. And so making sure that that found its way into not only how I organized my resume, my CV, but especially in my cover letter, and not just taking the I approach of I've done this, but more translating into how these experiences can help enrich the department and help in the teaching of your students. And so I think really that, like I said, the same principles really apply there. And also too, again, assembling a good portfolio. And one of the things that makes, I think, a good professor is in this field, I think is continuing to work in the field. So for example, I've been very, when I started to teach the advanced reporting class, and which involved magazine writing, one of the things I've done the last 5 years here is to do magazine writing to make myself a better teacher. And so I've been writing for, a couple, half a dozen, or actually probably more like 7, 8, 9, 10 magazines to help make me it made me a better candidate when I applied here at Northwest. And so it's doing the things either in the classroom or outside of the classroom, again, like taking on study abroad here. I'm sure that was probably attractive. The fact that I'd led four study abroad groups at Western, I'm sure was also appealing to the faculty here and when they were considering hiring me. And so doing all the same thing, basically the same principles apply, is show that you are willing to go above and beyond, and that you are committed to being a good employee and a good teacher and working well with students.
Being a good teammate. That's what I always say. Like, remember that when you're applying for positions, they're always kind of picking teams, right? Like the whole grade school, like, do I want you on my team? Do I want you on my team? And I think really, as long as I always tell people, like, that hiring manager or that person, as long as you can communicate well with them and kind of show how good of a teammate you can be to that hiring manager, really that's the whole key of all the whatever documents you write or whatever portfolio items you have. You just trying to show them that you're a good team member. So,
and it works the other way in an interview too, is that I think it's important for those interviewing to really to show how they would be good colleagues as well. And that was one of the things when I interviewed here, is that everyone was very welcoming, and I could tell this would be a supportive environment, and that it wasn't easy to leave Missouri Western, but the sense of community and family that I got here, again, being part of being a Bearcat, my definition of Bearcat, I think really came through here, and my colleagues have all been so supportive and so helpful as I've stumbled my way through here these first couple of years, especially in the time of COVID.
Yeah, that was a little bit of extra complication in there. That is a good point, though. And I tell students especially that as well. You're going to an interview, but you have a responsibility to make sure that's the team you want to join, because it might not be the team that you think it is on the outside. So, do your due diligence and always have questions to ask the team that's interviewing you, to make sure they may give you a job offer, but maybe that's not the team you want to be on. You still have to accept the offer. So you still have some control there. So flat final open podium to give you some space to talk about what you want to talk about.
Wow, you've covered things pretty well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have not covered. Just again, I encourage students to take advantage of all the opportunities that are available here at Northwest. Again, that's one of the things that also brought me here, that really drew me to make this jump, is that there are so many great opportunities for students here at Northwest, and for students to take that initiative and to be able to interact with their faculty in a closer way than a lot of universities, to do the study abroad trips, to again, to be on, in our case, the student media, the wealth of opportunities they have here with the student media. And so just that this is a great place and a great home for really developing yourself as a person and as a professional, and not to take that for granted. And again, just to do the minimum is to jump in and take advantage of all those opportunities.
That's a great way to end.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. We've
Yeah,
enjoyed
absolutely.
visiting with
Great.
you. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank
Take it
you.
home, Travis.
All right. Well, that will do it for another episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to follow on your podcast platform of choice and on YouTube. Also, click the little notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an upload. And you can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and we have a LinkedIn page.